All right. So, welcome everyone. This is a Make Learning Easier seminar. And I know that there's a lot of you that are homeschoolers. There's some of you that are watching online. Welcome. Watching after the fact, so you won't be able to get in on the questions. But we do have a lot of help for that if you have questions after hearing what you are hearing today. Just want to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Jan Bedell, and I'm a neurodevelopmentalist. That's that's a mouthful. So that's just someone that is focused on how does the brain develop and how can you help it develop better. So whether you have a child with learning challenges, learning labels, or no learning issues at all, you can enhance their brain. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here. Just a wide range of ways to make those pathways in the brain work better. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. And the name of my company is Brain Sprints because we make brains move faster and more efficiently. Um, I have been a public school teacher, a private school teacher, a homeschool teacher, a homeschool for 8 years, 5 years, both of my girls, and 3 more years, the one with special needs, after I found the neurodevelopmental approach. And what I found was it not only helped my daughter with special needs, but uh, everyone that was using this approach was getting better. The kids with dyslexia, the kids with ADD, um, ADHD, I guess they've compiled all that, or even if they have syndromes, because the thing that's in common with everyone is the brain. Everybody has one of those. So traditionally, to make learning easier, what we're taught most of the time is you got to have the right curriculum. Anybody heard that? You have to identify learning styles. Most people in the homeschool community are familiar with learning styles, and we're going to talk a lot about that. And, do you really have to change everything based on what your child's learning style is? I believe that's a myth, so we'll go over that myth. And sometimes it's like making learning easier if you have one-on-one time with them. And if you have several children, that's not always easy. And some people think, well, it'd be easier if I was a good teacher. And that may not be the crux of it either. Or it could be the child's IQ. That's what traditionally is looked at. I'm going to offer a different perspective today. Um, the the real foundation for learning is our brain. The brain controls everything we do, so we have to start there. So I'm going to help you understand a little bit about the neurodevelopmental approach and why it's important for life. And that may be something you haven't even heard of, but it really can change your life. And then I'm going to equip you with some information that can unlock your child's fullest God-given potential. So first, to be able to do this, we have to think differently. So what is the foundation for learning? It really is the brain. And we haven't thought of it like that. We traditionally think of all those other things. But I want you to do this little experiment with me to help you get into that realm of thinking differently. Now, some of you may have already experienced this, but when I experienced this for the first time, it was pretty dramatic to me. You see this logo, you see it all the time, especially if you're out in the country. They're going back and forth across the road all the time. And it's a very familiar logo to you. But someone had to point out to me something hidden in this logo. Have you all experienced this before? Have you seen this? Let's see. Is that something new to you, Carmen? So when I saw this, I thought this is like what neurodevelopment is. Every time I see one of these FedEx lines, I only look at the arrow. And when I think about education, I think of it through the neurodevelopmental lens. So here's what everybody wants, whether you're homeschool, public school, private school, you want children who can read well and comprehend, be great at math, stay on task, follow directions, and be independent learners. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
That's what we're looking for. So, what you're describing to me is a house that's sitting on a good foundation. Now, if you have a house that's not on a good foundation, what happens? There's cracks in the walls, the windows stick, the doors won't open, and it just does not function correctly. And the same thing happens with our brain. So remember, we're going to be thinking differently. The other day, it came just a revelation kind of came to me that the way education has been taught all this time is that we have this vehicle of education and we want to move it from point A to point B. And we want to go from first grade to second grade or third grade to fourth grade. And we concentrate on the engine of this vehicle, which is typically curriculum. What curriculum do I use? I used to go to homeschool book fairs and people with dyslexia would come by, children with dyslexia, and say, well, what curriculum do I use for that? Well, my whole thing is you're going to not use this particular curriculum, you're going to make the brain work better. So if you had this beautiful engine and this beautiful vehicle and this beautiful engine in it that was on this dirt road, what would happen? Could it move at full capacity? You'd have to slow down. It'd be uncomfortable. It would be bumpy. You just couldn't go at your full potential on this kind of road. But what neurodevelopment does is build a superhighway so those all that learning can flow much more easily. Now, the foundation of learning being the brain, we're starting with brain organization. So if you have little ones, this is very important to you right at this moment. Tummy time, tummy time, tummy time. Or when you have grandchildren, tummy time, tummy time, tummy time. It's so important to get the information in through the tactile system on their tummy. Now, many of you don't have children that are this age. And the good news is that God has made something through his created order that you can reorganize lower parts of the brain at any time, at any age. Now, what I want you to do is this is a kind of a picture of God's created order with the spinal cord there, and at the lowest level, that's where they're just moving around and getting oriented to in space. And then the next level is crawling on their stomach. So, like the army crawl, what you want to do there is whatever age your child is, you want them to get down on the floor and say, move from here to there. And like an army guy, keep your tummy on the ground. And you watch them and see what happens. Are they moving in a good cross pattern movement? Is the right arm and the left leg moving at the same time? And they're moving across the floor? Or do they kind of look like a beached whale? That may let you know why their thoughts are so disorganized and their room is so disorganized and everything around them is disorganized. Because this is where organization starts. Then the next level is creeping up on the hands and knees. You also want to look for cross pattern movement there. Is the right hand and the left knee hitting at the same time? Can they chew gum and go forward and backward and it just be very smooth and synchronized? That means that that part of their brain is organized. And then the walking is a cross pattern as well. Walking running, skipping, that can all be cross-pattern movement. Now, I had one family that had a 16-year-old, and he said, my sibling has to do all these things. I wonder if it would help me any. And he put himself on a little routine of crawling, creeping, and skipping 2 minutes every day. He did this for 6 weeks. And he said, even my teachers are telling me my papers are more organized. So no matter what age you are, this can be reorganized. If you're interested in finding out more about this, you want to go to Brain Coach Tips channel on YouTube or Rumble, either one. And there's lots of videos there on neurodevelopment that can give you more information. So in looking at the whole foundation, there's different parts of the foundation. We've talked just briefly about brain organization, and now we're going to talk about receiving. So receiving is bringing information in through the five senses. We learned about this in kindergarten, the touch and taste and smell and hear and seeing. The three that are the most important where information comes in is our tactile system, so the touch and hearing and seeing. If there's a challenge in any of these areas, if the information coming in is distorted, that's going to make kind of a bumpy road for the child. Say they're hypersensitive to sound. If that's the case, then they are oftentimes overloaded in their sensory system and can't pay attention to other things. So it may seem like they're distracted when I guess technically they are, because that sound is distracting them. But it's not just they have an attention problem, they have hypersensitivity to sound. So you want to look at this if the child is, they don't want to put their socks on, or every time they walk in someplace, they talk about how bad it smells and that's all they can pay attention to. These kinds of things can really negatively affect our learning. But by the grace of God, we have plasticity in our brain. I don't know if that's a new term to you or not. It's coming more and more common, but it means that the cells of the brain can actually the appendages that you see, they're coming out of the middle of that cell. Those are called dendrites, and that's what grows in your brain. So in our brain, just to put it in perspective, our cells are 3% of our brain. 97% of our brain are the connections. So what we've found is if you give stimulation to the brain, you're going to make more connections, and then you're going to have better function. So if you think about our curriculum, say, typically we're looking for function. Can they read this and fill in the blank? Can they do this mathx problems, or whatever it is we're trying to get the output of? Output is what comes out, and that's what we're focused on in our education typically, is how well can they function in English? How well can they function in this place or the other? So this is another area where we're asking you to think differently, because we've got to do the stimulation first to build those connections, and then the function follows. Now, if you have a child with dyslexia, you may say that you've looked on the internet and they say, well, their brain is different. It just looks different. And that may be true, but that can change if we give it stimulation. So neurodevelopment really does unlock the child's full potential. And I'm going to be talking about inputting information versus outputting information. I believe we ask for output way too soon when we haven't given enough input. And it's almost like setting Mozart piece in front of a child has never played the piano before and just expect him to play. We have to build that foundation just like that. So there are three keys you want to pay attention to in your teaching that you can use to teach anything. And that is frequency. Frequency is how often something is said or heard or written. It's how often something, the input comes in. And then the intensity is how strong the information comes in. Is it evoking emotions? Is it part of their interest? That always adds intensity. And then duration. Duration is short periods of time and then overtime. So if we do something for 2 minutes that's very intense and we do it for 5 days in a row, we get a lot more benefit than if we just tell them and take 20 minutes to try to get that information into them. So this can be used for anything that you want to teach. Uh, I'm trying to think if we'll come back to this and give you some examples of different things that you can do here. And then if you will, as you think of questions, just put them in the chat. And those of you that are watching this recording later, you can always email us at office@brainsprints.com with your questions. So we talked about plasticity. This is a better picture of those dendrites that I was talking about. Most of the things that are sticking out there on the right side of that square rectangle are dendrites, and the other part is an axon. That's what, as they come close together, they make the pathways. And as we stimulate the brain, those dendrites grow. Now, I have a story of 10-year-old John who was uh, brilliant. He was very smart, had a really high IQ. And so the expectations were pretty high for him. He came home one day and just plopped in the chair and was pouting and just going, I don't know how they expect me to write like they want me to write. My hand feels like fluff. His mother was very puzzled and said, Your hands feel like fluff? Well, as I've learned more about this, this was a brilliant way of saying, I don't have a good pathway from my brain to my hand, and it just feels like fluff down there. So it's not that he had uh, what do they call it now? This dysgraphia. Uh, he just didn't have good pathways to his hands. So he was very frustrated. But they did some stimulation to build those pathways. And let's say you could look at this under a microscope, and then 6 months later, it might look like this. Same cell would look like this. You see how that's going to connect to a lot more pathways? Well, it ended up that John, uh, sorry, his name was Jim. Um, Jim became a dentist, a dental surgeon that teaches at the university using both hands. So it's really amazing what can happen. Now, um, learning styles has been really big in the homeschool community. They say find your child's learning style and teach to it. Well, I believe that all learning styles are important because some information comes in more efficiently in one area of input, like through your eyes, or in this instance, tactily. If you're going to teach somebody to cut hair, you would you could give them a lecture. You could also have them listen to things, but to really learn to cut hair, you've got to get in there and touch it and feel it and try it and actually do it tactily. So there's more efficient ways for certain things to come in uh, through your different learning channels. Now, visually, part of we're talking about how we're receiving information, and visually, this is very important how someone is seeing. So one thing that you can do to test how your children are actually seeing things on the page is you can do what we call um, a little test. Just get something like a pencil topper or something that they can look at, hold it about 18 inches from the bridge of their nose, and you're going to come in to about 2.5 inches and then go back out. What you're looking for is that information, those eyes, I'm sorry, coming together smoothly and back out. If you see as you're coming in, one of the eyes just kind of goes off to the side, that means they've lost their convergence. They're not putting the image from one eye on top of the other. So they could be seeing double. It's some kids describe it as the things swim on the page. The spaces between things make rivers. I mean, they describe all kinds of things. But since that's how they see all the time, they don't know to tell you any different. Right. The other thing you can do is do a little horizontal and vertical tracking to see if their eyes are moving together. So that's some things you can check at home just to see if that's an issue. Some children can overcome that easily, and others, it's a huge challenge for them. So since some information is going to come in better visually, like a sunset, for instance, you can't hear a sunset, you can't feel a sunset, you have to see it. That means that's a more efficient way to bring that information in. Now, how does this work academically? If you are doing a math problem, we believe the math process, what is multiplication, what is division, that is a visual kind of uh, best way to get the information in. So if you had a problem like this, what do we typically do? We say, okay, under the brackets is 226.0, and we're going to divide that by 5. Now, the first thing you do is, does it go into 2? And then we just talk, 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 talk. If the child knew what to say to you, they would say, would you please be quiet so I can see what's happening? So if you say divide, and then you say multiply, subtract, bring down. Well, I'm sorry. I say record too. I say divide, record your answer so you don't forget that part. Multiply, subtract, bring down. And you're doing it for them as you're saying those words. Do you see how clearly that information is going to come in? And they'll be able to see the steps of long division so much better and not be distracted by a lot of auditory. So when you're doing visual or math, what I often recommend to make learning much more easy is sit down with them for 10 minutes and you do a problem, they do a problem. You do a problem, they do a problem. I had a friend that their child was homeschooled for a while, but went to school and he had algebra and he just was not getting it. He was so mad at that teacher. He was not telling him how to do it. And so he brought it home, and my friend knew about this technique. And she said, okay, watch Michael. And she just did the problem for him and let him watch it. She did another problem for him and let him watch it. She did the third problem for him. And then before she was even finished, he goes, thanks, Mom, I got it. Grabbed the book and took off. So some people go, oh my gosh, I don't have time. I've got 4 or 5 kids. How do I sit down with them for that amount of time? My, different thinking is, how much time do you use checking the paper? How much time do you take correcting the mistakes that were made on the paper? What's the child's attitude like when they've got a bunch of red marks on their paper? So if you take that time and put it into just working with them, you'll have a much happier, more, uh, things will go a lot easier for you, in my experience. So if by chance you have a child that's behind in their math, we have something called visual circle math that we recommend to people to bring them up to grade level quickly and actually see process of math. It's very scripted. You see uh, what you're supposed to say, what the page is supposed to look like. And my point in pointing this out is oftentimes people go, oh my gosh, they're in third grade. I mean, they're in fifth grade, but they can't even do third grade work. So I'm going to have to go through the whole third grade curriculum. And then I've got to go home through the whole fourth grade curriculum, and he's never going to catch up. This is something that will bring them up to through fifth grade reading math level very quickly, and then they can plug in the curriculum that is for their age. So what about auditory? Some people say, well, I've got an auditory learner. I have to turn everything into auditory. Well, there are some things like math facts, for instance, that are better come in through the auditory channel. So what do we do in our society typically to teach math facts? We typically,
Flashcards.
yes. And flashcards like this, right? With no answer.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we thinking? Are we thinking it's a magic card because we've got that held up and we want something to come out of their brain? Or the other thing we do is get these big old speed drills, and we say, "Go faster, do this faster," and that puts stress on them. They tend to go into their emotions and they can't remember anything that they know. So instead of that, with this idea of frequency, intensity, and duration, I created something called Rapid Recall System, where they see, hear, say, and write 5 math facts 14 times a day. And you think, oh my gosh, how much time does that take? It only takes 6 minutes because out of that 14, everything is input except for two. So you're getting input, input, input. And then after they've had 60 exposures of the correct information, they uh, can do the speed drill very easily because they've had 60 exposures of the correct information.
Right.
This is Tanda Trussell. Years ago, she put several of the neurodevelopmental activities in her classroom. She'd been teaching for 17 years. This was her 18th year. And she said, I was with her one day where they had already done their speed drill. These are first graders. And they'd already done their speed drill. They were doing a different part where they hear it and they write it as they hear the correct answer, they're writing it. And when we got to the end of that, in unison, the children just turned the page over and said, can we do this side too? And they'd already done that earlier that was not part of what was going to happen next. She looked at me and she says, never in my 18 years of teaching have I had first graders wanting to do math. And they were just successful. So they wanted to do more of it. She said, they even asked for math homework. It's crazy. We did a test there, a little research project where we tested everybody. There were 4 classes and everybody scored about the same. That's what's in the red. And that was at the first of the year. And then they did the same state adopted curriculum, and the one on the right added the rapid recall. And you can see what a difference it was for them. Huge difference. Okay, so if we are receiving information correctly, then all these areas are going to work better. So instead of saying, well, my child is a tactile learner and trying to get them to touch everything to learn, which is very challenging. You build the abilities in all these other areas. So as we're receiving information, if you've got situations where they're not getting that auditory, they're hypersensitive or things like that, you want to talk to us and see what else we can do. But these kinds of things for processing, that's your short-term memory. That we can equip you with very easily through this seminar. So processing, that's equals your short-term memory. We have both auditory and visual short-term memory, but the auditory seems to be more impactful of their total abilities long-term. So it's basically what comes in and what comes right back out. If they have trouble with this, you might be asking yourself these kinds of questions. Why can't my child follow directions? Why can't he remember to do his chores? You may even wonder if it's rebellion because, they're 12. They've done the same chores. But it may not be that. It may be auditory processing because it affects everything. It affects their behavior. Oftentimes they act like younger children when their processing is low. They have trouble following directions, comprehending what's said, and also like in conversation, and also what they read. It affects their ability to think conceptually, like see the big picture, cause and effect. Maybe if I do this, I don't want that to happen, so maybe I shouldn't do that. Conversational language, sometimes they just come and interrupt you because if I don't tell you right now, I'll forget. That kind of thing definitely happens. Attending, staying on task. Many of these things are on the checklist for ADHD. And in my opinion, the processing of the whole country has come down because we're doing much more visual, visual, visual instead of things that develop our auditory processing. It also affects your ability to use phonics. So if you're having any trouble reading with phonics, you want to take a look at this because they're processing. If you're doing phonics, it's an auditory approach. You have to hold this piece, this piece, this piece, and the rule all together to get that word out. And if they can't hold the pieces together, they might be really good at three-letter words. Like my daughter, she knew all 70 phonograms, but she could only pronounce words that were three-letter words until we changed and started working on auditory processing. We changed the way we're doing reading, so she got a lot more confident. And then she was able to have the best of both worlds coming out of that. So I think I do have an absent-minded professor. If you have a child that's ADD or ADHD, that would be on that Brain Coach Tips channel, and you could watch it there. But if you have something to write with and write on, that's what we need next because we're going to do a little experiment here, a little exercise in auditory processing. So if you don't have that, go ahead and get it right quick while I'm describing what we're going to do. So this is called an auditory processing test, and I'm going to give you a series of numbers. Now, the key is you can't write anything down until I've done all the numbers. So you listen first, and then you write all the things down. So let's hopefully Margaret's finding hers real quick. And what we're going to do is, again, I'm going to call out the numbers, wait till I'm through, and then you write them down. Because then we'll be able to check and see how you did. Okay, let's try this one. 8, 2, 9, 1. Write that down. Okay, because we have somebody that knows how to sign and probably knows how to read lips, I'm going to cover my mouth so it's not turned into a visual activity. It's all auditory. You ready for this one? 6, 3, 5, 7, 4. Okay, let's try this one. 9, 1, 8, 2, 0, 3. Good. Let's try this one. 6, 0, 7, 5, 2, 9, 4. All right. I'm seeing a few worried looks, but we're going to do one more.
I might have mixed up two numbers on that last one.
Let's try this. No pressure. Y'all listen carefully, right? 5, 3, 6, 2, 7, 1, 0, 9. Now, when while that feeling is fresh on your mind, where the numbers got pretty long, tell me how you felt.
I definitely failed the last one.
Yeah, there was anxiety on that last one.
Anxiety, failure. What about you, Margaret?
Well, as an interpreter for the deaf, I use auditory processing on a regular basis, and so yeah. But
That's
not
very
saying I got them all right, but
No, but that is a very good point because you are using that, you're practicing that all the time when you're interpreting because you have to hold a lot of information, get it out, and then hold more as it's happening because they're not slowing down. So
yeah,
that is
for
a
real.
really good point. So you didn't feel a lot of anxiety with that,
No.
right? Good. So if your child is 5 years old or more, they should be able to, a 5-year-old should be able to do 5 numbers. And at the end, we're going to give you a test kit, a link to a test kit that you can download for both auditory and visual processing and test your kids and find out where they are. If they want to go to college, you want to get them like to 9, which is superior function. And they'll definitely be the leaders of their class when they have that kind of processing. And if they want to be doctors and lawyers, you want to get them to about like 11 or 12, especially lawyers. You know, they have to hold all that information. I'm thinking Ted Cruz, if you saw him in the debates, he probably has a 12-digit auditory digit span because he could tell everything that everybody else said in the order they said it. I mean, it was pretty impressive. So we will get you the test kit. I think Sarah's going to put that link in the chat for you, but it will test for both auditory and visual short-term memory. And a 5-year-old should be able to do 5, a 6-year-old 6, a 7-year-old, 10-year-old, or an adult should be able to do at least 7. So that's your first breaking point, and anything above that is superior function. The way you work on that is twice a day for 2 minutes. So again, we're using that frequency, intensity, and duration. Takes a while for it to go up, but it's well worth it in your child's ability to, they're just like radar everywhere they go, picking up information when their processing is high. If the processing is not good as a preschooler, they're not going to be remembering their numbers, their letters, or words. And then if a child is older and they have this challenge visually, They're going to have problems with about everything: math, spelling, reading, visual attention, picking up visual information, and sometimes even eye contact. So continuing to work on this foundation, we've got, first we've got to organize the brain, then we've got to make sure information's coming in well, and then we work on that short-term memory. And then we're working on storage of information. Where does that information go so that it can come out easily? Have you ever asked yourself, why does my child know something one day and not the next? Why does it take him so long to do everything or to even answer a question? Why can't he remember things for a test? This could be because of where the information is stored, and we call that dominance. So dominance starts with the hand. You have to start with the hand because that is the part that's genetic. And so if a child is right-handed, you want them to be right-eared, right-eyed, and right-footed to put information in the right place. If you see that they're mixed dominant, oftentimes these children have emotions that really run on high. They lack analytical thought and logic. They sometimes have letter reversals, and they easily go into their subdominant. Like I was talking about with the speed drill, you say anything with speed, I'm timing you, and they just go into their emotions, and oftentimes it's a meltdown. Some people that are mixed-eared especially stammer or stutter, and they oftentimes do not have access to what they know on a test. They studied, you studied with them, they knew it, and they went to take the test. They went under stress, they went into their emotions, no access to what they know. And the good news is that can change as well. So looking at the big picture, if we have poor lower level brain organization, if we have poor receiving, processing, storing, it could influence which learning style that we use. So in other words, if you have a child that struggles visually, they're probably going to be a tactile or auditory learner. If they struggle auditorily, they're going to be a visual or tactile learner. If their auditory and visual both of those are a struggle, then they tend to be a tactile learner. But as we've said, all of these channels are important. So we want to fix those glitches so learning is easier, like we said, because some things come in better visually, some things come in better auditorily. So looking at all the steps to learning, first we receive, then we process, then we store, and then we're able to use information. But isn't it interesting that that's where we tend to focus all the time, is how do they use the information? The really wonderful thing about this is it's never too late. I worked with a 55-year-old and a 54-year-old some years back, and they both were professional women. One of them was a phonics. The one at the bottom was a phonics teacher, actually, because she struggles so much with reading. She has so much compassion with them. And you can see that first blue, that's word recognition. And she could just sound out any word. But look at her comprehension just above that in the green. She had 9th grade reading comprehension. The piece that's out beside it and the number shows how many years and months they went up in reading comprehension in 4 months. So they can quickly come up to higher levels when we work on these different areas. So if the brain is inefficient, it's the difference between dial-up, which we basically had out here on our farm when we moved out here to Palestine, and high-speed internet. And I'll tell you, I'm much more of a happy camper now, like that lady. Now that I can have a little higher speed internet. So here's some resources that we have for you. Sarah, do you have those links
I sure do. Yes, ma'am.
Did you put them in the chat already?
I'm putting them in there right now.
Okay, so there'll be one that you can use for the free auditory test kit. The link to that YouTube channel that I was telling you about is there. And typically, whenever possible, I get on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock and just do a live. And I'm there to answer questions as well. If you're have that time free sometime and want to ask a question. We also have free consultations. So there's a link for those. You can just go on and describe the situation that you have, and we can help direct you. And Sarah, did you want to talk about the screenings?
Yes, ma'am. So one thing that we offer is if we want to get a group together to do screenings, it's a hefty discount. So I would like to put a group together of our homeschoolers. And Jan, we may want to wait and make sure that everybody got on that wanted to. I was expecting one other person. So maybe I'll reach out to her, make sure she can watch this Zoom, and then we'll proceed from there. But it's a screening is where we look at the functions of your child or yourself and kind of determine what program would work best for your child. And we spend time going over their functions, and then we spend time with you as a parent explaining what we're seeing and how to proceed.
So yes, it's just a snapshot of a few key areas that we talked about, the lower level brain organization, how the eyes are working, and the dominance. We look at that in the processing. So we can give you a snapshot of how they're doing right now and some things that you could do to stimulate the brain to work better. And like Sarah mentioned, we do have some programs for in-home that let me just stop the screen share. We have programs that we can teach you online to do at home. So I work with the majority of the people that we work with are homeschoolers, because you just have commitment already, you have the time and that kind of thing. So whether you want to just look at some of the YouTube channels and go, oh, I could, practice some of those things at home because my child's doing great, or you have a child that's got some struggles, it can help anyone. I had one child that was dyslexic, and he had a really high IQ. So when he went through the dyslexia program, he was at grade level when he was 10. He was able to get there pretty easily because he had such a high IQ. But his mom said, he's just really having to struggle to get there. And so we put him on a program, and he went from 6th grade in comprehension at 10 and a half to 10th grade in comprehension in just like less than a year and a half, just really opening up his full potential. So it's exciting work. It's exciting to see your children just thrive. And I think I'm a Christian myself, and as we build our leaders, I believe that as their processing is higher, they'll understand God's word better and also be able to lead because they see the big picture better. So it's exciting work. I just wanted to open it for questions here and just see if there's anything that I can help clear up, that because I went over things really fast.
Carmen, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. So I had a question about how puberty factors into this, because I have heard, and once again, I don't know how much of this is just anecdotal, but I've heard that, in puberty, your brain's rewiring. It's kind of, so you're having to kind of go through not the same things that you do as, a baby, but there are a lot of rewiring that happens in your brain. And so I guess warnings I've had from homeschool moms who've gone before talk about how, you get to a certain age range and don't be surprised when it's like they seem like they just everything's gone all of a sudden and what's going on. And so, I don't want to uh I don't know. I guess questions about when is it just like you just write it out and let it happen because it's just going to rewire, and then how much do you go, okay, there's something actually wrong here, or what are some things to do to help? Is there a way to help that process be a little bit less bumpy?
That's a really good point because they do say there's a cortisol wash over the brain and during puberty, and cortisol does dissolve a lot of those pathways. So it would be good to do like PE, some cross pattern movement. And I like the lower level to really build that foundation, like the army crawl and the creep on the hands and knees, forward and backward, that kind of thing. You can do the cross march, where you're marching and reaching across the midline to the other one, but that's more at the cortical level of the brain development. So it would be a benefit to all the children to have PE, whatever age they are, doing some of that cross pattern movement. Sarah, did you want to comment on that?
I'm just giving a thumbs up because I'm a PE
Okay.
teacher.
Oh yeah. Um, so that would help. And then everybody needs processing. So if you can spare that 2 minutes twice a day, we are coming out with something in the future. Not going to say when because I always am off on I'm a visionary, I'm off on the timing, but where they could just get on the computer and do it, and it would give them feedback and they would know whether they were correct or not. So it would be something they could do independently. Right now, we have the instructions where you could do it with them in the supplies if you want to try that. But that was a good question.
I would love to know the auditory processing test numbers.
Oh, sorry. That's a good. Yes, I usually have a slide for that, and I forgot to put it in here. Sorry. Okay, so the first one was 8291,
Okay.
and then 63574, then 918203. The next one is 6075294, and the last one was 53627 109.
53627 109.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So if you got the next to the last one, that's 7. So that's good. And then 8 is superior function. Now I usually say if you got that without doing these tricks, because our brain is so amazing, it tries to help us with inefficiencies, I would say. And so if you didn't picture them like they were on an imaginary blackboard and then just read them off and write them, then that was a correct auditory score. And if you didn't chain them together, if you didn't say 5, 5, 3, 5, 3, 6, 5, 3, 6, 2, if you didn't do that, then it's a legitimate score. So the reason I bring that up, especially here, is if your children are doing that, if they're looking up, that means they're visualizing those numbers. And so you say, now just listen to these numbers, and you'll see their eye gaze go down. That's a body language for listening is eyes down, and body language for visualizing is when their eyes are up. If you see their mouth moving, that probably means they're chaining. So you say, now just listen to each piece. So you don't tell them what not to do because, it's like an elephant. You don't think of an elephant and that's all you can think about. So you just tell them what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Anything new, reflection of what you heard? Anything that was of most interest to you that
Well,
maybe you hadn't thought about?
I actually do have a question. So, so if you're left brained, um, but you tend to uh, be more use your left eye or left ear more. How do you retrain that to where do you just close the other one and make yourself use the other one, or
That's
uh
a really good question. And basically that's it. When you if you're using the wrong eye, for about 4 hours a day, you put a patch on, or you take glasses and you just put a film on this one. So the brain goes, oh, I have to use this one. So you're training it over time. And then with the ear, you use an earplug. Now the earplug is more like all waking hours. And I had to do this when I trained to do this originally. I had to do a program myself so I would know what I was going to be putting people through. And my ear was off. I was using my left ear. And so it takes the unfortunate thing about changing dominance is that it takes a while, usually 9 months to a year of consistently telling the brain, okay, you got to do this, you got to use this, you got to use this. And right about the time my ear was changing, it felt like everything was kind of falling apart. It's like I couldn't get my words out. My thinking was foggy. It was all kinds of crazy things. And I talked to them, and they said, well, it's probably you're just about to make the shift. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, it's like the brain finally goes, okay, I give up. I'm going to use the right. And things have been much more efficient that way.
Did you notice a difference after from before you even started to then after you retrained your ears? Did you notice a difference?
Yes,
What
yes.
did you
And
notice?
I did this at 40 something myself. And I have a lot of empathy for children that have struggles because I struggled to read when I was young. My parents lived in a very small little apartment, and I could just creep, on hands and knees, a couple of creeps and stand up and just cruise everywhere. So I walked at 9 months. So it's not a good thing for kids to walk early. We say, knock them down, knock them down. They need to spend more time with that, organizing that part of the brain. So it really did help me. And again, proving that it's never too late, but it was a huge difference for me, remembering things and yeah. Jerry, did you have a question?
No, I've just been sitting back listening. It's very, very interesting. So yeah, sorry about I got called into the kitchen for a few minutes, but no, this looks great. I look forward to it. I know we need to talk some more about it into the with the homeschool group,
Yes,
but
sir.
It's
I'm very interested in
great, great. It's very fascinating, and it's challenging you to think differently, um, but in a very good way, I think. When we are looking for solutions in curriculum, we don't always find them. We might find something that works a little bit better for our kids, but it's still not that sports car on the freeway that we're looking for.
yeah, yeah. It was very interesting about the nerve cells and how the dendrites go out. That's pretty cool. The fact because they thought at one time that those do not regenerate. They do not.
Mhm.
That was the thought maybe 20 years ago, and so that's good to see
Yes.
that.
Yes, yeah, they used to say we were hardwired by 20 and it was downhill from there.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
But we know that that's not true because a stroke victim that we've known lost function, and then with therapies and things, they often gain it back. Maybe not always totally, but they do make progress oftentimes. And so, yeah, we know we are definitely fearfully and wonderfully made. That is
You bet.
for sure.
You bet.
And we have that brain plasticity as long as we're alive.
Right.
So
Very good.
it's
Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Anything else that I can help you with?
No, right now
Again,
I'll probably have more. I will have more questions, I'm sure, but right now we're just kind of starting. So yeah, the more I find out, the more questions I'll have. Put it like that.
oh, absolutely. That's a huge learning curve I've been on for 30 years.
Oh man, you talk about the numbers too. Oh my God, I used to be able to memorize that because I was an engineer. You know, what I'm talking about. I could remember numbers. Now, oh my God, that was horrible.
Lost some of your
Sorry,
auditory
sorry.
processing, huh?
Oh my God, yes. down the down the toilet.
All right. Well, thank you all for
So,
being here. And again, if you're online, just send your questions to office at Brain Sprints, and it's a plural, brainsprints.com.